Hello and welcome to India Reads. Today we are going to start a new book, and this is very special. Let me tell you why. So I found this book in my collection, and this is actually not from my collection. This is from my father's collection. If you can read it, it is The Early Life by Rabindranath Tagore, and this book is an original edition, which means that it is from 1954. So there's this tiny stamp here, which is the stamp of my father, which he had probably procured during the 50s, and I got this bound about 10 years back, and on the first page I put my stamp here, so it's like both our names are being stamped here. So I'm this book is rough, like I said, 66 years old, and it's an original, and it is a autobiography of sorts. I say of sorts because it only deals with a particular time in Tagore's life, and it's called The Early Life, which obviously means that it talks about his childhood and his growing up years. So let's dive into the book. Chapter 1. Teaching begins. Rabindranath Tagore was born in Calcutta on May 7th, 1861. He was the 14th child and the youngest son of the saintly Maharishi Devendranath Tagore. The two other boys mentioned in the chapter were his next elder brothers, Somendra, and his sister's son Satya. Uh, let's start. We three boys were being brought up together. Both my companions were 2 years older than I. When they were being placed under the tutor, my teaching also began. But what I learnt, nothing remains in my memory. We had an old cashier, Kailash by name, who was like one of the family. He was a great wit and would be occasionally cracking jokes with everybody, old and young, recently married, son-in-laws, newcomers into the family circle being his special buds. There was a room of suspicion that his humor had not deserted him even after his death. Once my elders were engaged in an attempt to start a postal service with the other world by means of a planchette. At one of the sittings, the pencil scrawled out the name of Kailash. He was then asked what sort of life one led where he was. Not a bit of it, was his reply. Why should you get so cheap what I had to die to learn? Thus, this Kailash used to rattle off for my special delectation a doggerel ballad of his own composition. The hero was myself, and there was a glowing anticipation of the arrival of heroine. And as I listened, my interest would increase at the picture of this world charming bride illuminating the lap of future in which she sat enthroned. The list of jewelry with which she was bedecked from head to toe, and the unheard of splendor of the preparation of the bridal might have turned older and wiser heads. But what moved the boy and said wonderful joy pictures flitting across his vision was the rapid jingle of the frequent rhymes and the swing of rhythm. The next thing I remember is the beginning of my school life. One day I saw my elder brother and my sister's son Satya, also a little older than myself, starting off to school, leaving me behind, accounted unfit. I had never yet ridden in a carriage nor even been out of the house. So when Satya came back full of unduly glowing anecdotes of his adventures on the way, I felt I simply could not stay at home. Our tutor tried to dispel my illusion with sound advice, and a resounding slap. You're crying to go to school now. You will have to cry a lot more to be off later on. I have a recollection of I have no recollection of the name, the features or disposition of this tutor of ours, but the impression of this weighty advice and weightier hand has never faded. Never in my life have I heard a truer prophecy. My crying drove me prematurely into Oriental Seminary. What I learned there, I have no idea, but one of the methods of punishment I still bear in mind. The boy who was unable to repeat his lessons was made to stand on the bench with arms extended, and on his upturned palms were piled a number of slates. It is for psychologists to debate how far this method is likely to produce a better grasp of things. I thus began my schooling at an extremely tender age. Oh, the print is going in this. This book is really old and it's got little markings from my dad in pencil. My initiation into literature had its origin at the same time for the books which were in vogue in the servants' quarters. Chief among them were Bengali translation of Chanakya's aphorisms and the Ramayana of Kirtivasa. A picture of one day's reading of the Ramayana comes clearly back to me. The day was a cloudy one. I was playing in the long veranda overlooking the road. All of a sudden, Satya, for some reason I do not remember, wanted to frighten me by shouting, "Policeman, policeman!" My idea, my ideas of duties of a policeman were of extremely vague description. One thing I was certain about was that a person charged with a crime, once placed in the policeman's hand, would be as sure as wretch caught in a crocodile's serrated grip and go under and be never seen before. Not knowing how innocent boys escape this relentless penal code, I bolted towards the inner apartments with shudders running down my back for blind fear of pursuing policemen. I broke into my mother's I broke to my mother the news of the impending doom, but it did not seem to disturb her much. Not, however, not deeming it. Oof, I can't read this at all. Not deeming it safe to venture out again, I sat down on the sill of my mother's door to read the dog-eared Ramayana with a marbled paper cover which belonged to her old aunt. Alongside stretched the veranda, manning around the four sides of the super inner quadrangle on which had fallen the faint afternoon glow of the clouded sky. Finding me weeping over one of the sorrowful situations, my great aunt came and took away the book from me. So with this, we come to the end of chapter 1. This is, I guess, a reading book in English, so it's got explanations of what the word means, like bit, but, planchet, flitting across the vision, delectations, and so on and so forth. Yeah, let's go to chapter 2. It's a little difficult for me to catch the print sometimes. Chapter 2, Within and Without. Luxury was a thing unknown in the days of my infancy. The standard of living was then, as a whole, much more simple than it is now. Apart from that, the children in our household were extremely free from the loss of being too much looked after. The fact is that while the process of looking after may be an occasional treat for the guardians of the children, it is always an unmitigated nuisance. We used to be under the rule of other servants. To save themselves from trouble, they had almost suppressed our right for free movement. But the freedom of not being pestered made up even for the harshness of this bondage. Our minds were left clear of the toils of constant coddling, pampering, and dressing up. Our food has had nothing to do with delicacies. A list of one, a list of our articles of clothing would incite the modern boys scorn. On no pretext did we wear socks or shoes till we had passed on to the 10th year. In the cold weather, a second cotton tunic over the first one sufficed. It never entered our heads to consider ourselves ill off for that reason. It was only when old Niyamat, the tailor, would forget to put a pocket in one of our tunics that we complained, for no boy has ever been born poor, so poor that to have the wherewithal to stuff his pockets now. I right. By a merciful disproportion of providence, is there any difference between the wealth of the boys of the rich and of poor parentage? We used to have a pair of slippers each, but not always we had on our feet. Our habit of kicking away the slippers on ahead and catching them up made them work more or less hard, though effectually defeating at every step the reason of their being. So they were just kicking and not using the slippers. Our elders were in every way at a great distance from us. In their dress and food, living and dining, conversations and amusement, we caught glimpses of these and they were beyond our reach. Elders have become cheap to modern children. They they are too readily accessible and so are all objects of desire. Nothing ever came so easily to us. Many a trivial thing was for a rarity, and we lived mostly in the hope of attaining, when we were old enough, the things which the distant future held in front of us. The result was that what little we did get did not what little we did get, we enjoyed it to the utmost, from the skin to the core. Nothing was thrown away. The model child of a well-to-do family nibbles only half of the things he gets. The the greatest part of his world is wasted on him. uh, our days usually spent in the servants quarters in the southeast corner of the outer apartments, were spent in the servants quarters in the southeast corner of the servants apartments. One of our servants was Sham, a dark, chubby boy with curly locks, hailing from the district of Khulna. He would, I have no clue. Okay, he would meet me. He would meet me at a secluded spot and, tracing a chalk line around us, warn me with solemn face and uplifted finger of the perils of transgressing this ring. Whether the threatened danger was material or spiritual, I fully never understood, for a great fear used to possess me. I have read in the Ramayana of the tribulations of Sita for having left the ring drawn by Lakshmana, so it was not possible for me to be skeptical of its potency. Okay, let's go to chapter 3. Just below the window of the room was a tank with a flight of masonry steps leading down into the water. On its west bank, along with the garden wall, an immense banyan tree; to the south, a fringe of coconut palms. Ringed around as I was near this window, I would spend the whole day peering through the drawn Venetian shutters, gazing and gazing at this scene as of a picture book. as on a picture book. From early morning, our neighbors would drop in one by one to have their bath. I knew the time for each one to arrive. I was familiar with the peculiarity of each one's toilet. I would stop up I would stop up the ears with fingers as he took one of his regulation number of dips. One would stop up his ears with his fingertips as he took his regulation number of dips, after which he would depart. Another would not venture on a complete immersion but be content with only squeezing his wet towel repeatedly over his head. The third would carefully drive the surface impurities away with a rapid play of his arms, and then on a sudden impulse take a plunge. There was one who jumped in from the top steps without any preliminaries at all. Another would walk slowly in, step by step, muttering his morning prayers the while. Right? One was always in a hurry, hastening home as though he was hastening home as soon as he was through with his dip. Another went in with no sort of hurry at all, taking his bath leisurely, followed by a good rub down and a change from wet bathing clothes into clean ones, including a careful adjustment of the folds of his waistcoat cloth, ending with a turn or two in the water garden, and the gathering of the flowers with which he would finally saunter slowly homewards, radiating the cool comfort of his refreshed body as he went. This would go on till it was past noon, then the bathing place would be deserted and become silent. Only the ducks remained puddling aloud in the water after water snails or busy preening preening their feathers the live preening their feathers the livelong day. Going out of the house was forbidden for us. In fact, we had not even the freedom of all its parts. We perforce took our peeps of at nature from behind the barriers. Beyond my reach there was a thin limitless thing called the outside, of which flashes and sounds and scents used momentarily to convey and touch me through its interstices. It seemed to want to play with me through the bars with as many gestures. But it was free and I was bound. There was no way of meeting, so the attraction was all the stronger. The chalk line had been wiped away today, but the confining ring was still there. The distant is just distant, the outside is just beyond me, and I'm reminded of the poem I wrote when I was older. Oh, this is really tiny and this book is difficult to read. The tame bird was in a cage from front from free bird. The tame bird was in a cage, the free bird swam in. Okay, I can't, I'm going to skip this poem. The parapets of our terraced roofs were higher than my head. When I had grown taller, the tyranny of the servants had relaxed when, with the coming of the newly married bride into our house, I had achieved some recognition as a companion of her leisure. Then I did sometimes come up to the terrace in the middle of the day. By that time, everybody in the house would have finished their meal. There would be an interval in the business of the household. Over the inner apartments, and the inner apartments would rest the quiet of the midday siesta. The wet bathing clothes would be hanging over the parapets to dry. The crows would be picking by the leavings thrown over the recluse heap at the corner of the yard. In the solitude of that interval, the caged bird would, through gaps in the parapet, commune bill to bill with the free bird. My father hardly ever stayed at home. He was constantly roaming about. His his rooms on the third floor used to remain shut up. I would pass my hand through the Venetian shutters, thus doors to operating the latch to get the door open, and spend the afternoon lying motionless in the sofas at the south end. Okay, so yeah, there's one more page. Let's finish this. First of all, it was room always closed, and then there was the stolen eatery. This gave me a deep flavor of mystery. Further, the broad, empty expanse of terrace to the south, glowing in the rays of in the rays of the sun, would get me daydreaming. There was yet another attraction. The waterworks had been started in Calcutta, and the first exuberance of its triumphant entry, it, it did not stint even the Indian quarters of their supply. In that golden age of pipe water, it used to flow up to my father's third story bedroom, and turning on the shower tap, I would indulge to my heart's content in an untimely bath, not so much by the comfort of it, but to give rein to the desire for just as I fancied. The alternation of the joy of liberty and the fear of being caught made that shower of municipal water send arrows of delight thrilling into me. It was perhaps because of the possibility of the contact with the outside was so remote that the joy of it came to me much more readily. When the material is in profusion, the mind becomes lazy and leaves everything to it, forgetting for a successful fear of its joy, its internal equipment counts for more than the external. This is the chief lesson which an Indian state has to teach to man. There his possessions were few and trivial, and he needs no money for his happiness. The world of play is spoilt for the unfortunate youngster who is burdened with an unlimited quantity of playthings. Okay, with this, we've come to the end of chapter 3, and we will stop here. So in the three chapters that we've read till now, and it's really challenging to read, I hope that you are bearing it with me. In the three chapters that we have read till now, we are introduced to Rabindranath Tagore, who is uh, the youngest or one of the youngest in a long line of children, and therefore his companions are one elder brother who is 3 years older and his sister's son who is also older to him. Rabindranath Tagore spends a lot of time with them, but they've reached a stage where they are going to school. Rabindranath Tagore is homeschooled right now. He doesn't go to school, and there are no occasions or reasons for him to step out of the house. So when his sister's son comes with stories of how the school was, Tagore is obviously very very intrigued, and he doesn't want to miss out on the action, so he insists on also going to the school. Obviously he gets an advice and beating from his tutor. The tutor possibly is losing his employment. So the tutor tells him that you will well, now today you're crying because you want to go to school. There is a very likely possibility that you will cry for being in school and want to come back home. At that point of time, Tagore didn't realize, but later he realized that this was. He did not forget. He doesn't remember how the tutor looked and what his name was, but he doesn't forget the slap that he got and the advice. This was the truest prophecy that he had experienced. Anyway, he starts going to school, and the second chapter talks about how the school was and what kind of punishments they get, and if the child did not know anything they had to stand up and holding all the slates. He wonders on the what psychologists would feel about it, and how it whether it actually helps the child in anything at all. But nevertheless, this is how school was, and he slowly learns to accept it. The third chapter talks about the house that they stayed, and it seems to be an idyllic, beautiful house. His father has his rooms in the third floor. Tagore spends a lot. Tagore is not only restricted to go out, but also has restrictions within the house of where he could go, could not go. They obviously spend a lot of their time in the servants' quarters, and so he's familiar with that place. But apart from that, he spends a lot of time with his in his mother's room, from where he would which had like a balcony from where he would sit and watch. The views that he would get from the balcony would be of the tank where people used to come and have bath, and over a period of time in the mornings he would sit and watch them come for their bath. And he had learned to uh, understand about different people on how they would take a bath, and some would do it in a hurry, some would do it leisurely, some would jump into the water, some would take it step by step. So he had come to see and appreciate all of this. His father, like I said, had his rooms in the third floor. Tagore used to quietly go there in the quiet of the afternoon when everybody finished their meals and were drowsy and sleeping, having their siesta. He would walk up to his father's rooms. His father rarely spent time at home, so all the rooms were empty, and he could go in as he pleased because there was nobody to disturb him. One of the places that Tagore enjoyed going was the place where he would get running water from the bathroom, and he would enjoy taking a shower there. Now, this was obviously guilty pleasure. He was not allowed to do that, but the fact that he was not allowed to do that made it far more exciting for him, and that's about it. So, this is a good start. I am struggling to read the book, but let's continue and see if I can manage to read a bit more coherently and make the experience enjoyable. Do stick on with me for this for the next few readings of the book. This is a very small book, so I guess I'd finish it very fast. Um, till we meet again, take care. Goodbye. See you.